Hey guys, welcome back to another track breakdown video, featuring once again Rule 2. We're talking about our track Warlord.
Hello.
And this is the original stems that Rule 2 sent me. Just wanted to start off the video with that, kind of give an explanation, and you can see how it evolved from its original idea. And you can kind of hear it's actually pretty similar to the finished product and like the ideas it has, but the sound design is a little bit different. Of course, it's more fleshed out and mixed and whatnot. A lot more layers. Let's skip ahead here. All the track is really there, just we just worked a lot on it, getting balance right and adding and taking away elements.
The original idea stemmed from, I believe, a sample that I found. It was the drums in the beginning, like those tribal type drums. They ended up not being in the beginning part, but I think they were in the background at some point. I found those on like the internet or something, and I thought they sounded nice. Better sound quality than you usually get from like an online sample. So I started off with those. I thought they sounded kind of like they were like tribal, jungly kind of sound. So I started from there. I had to pitch them down. I think I EQ'd them a little bit to get the highs out. That's pretty much just the undertone of the intro. And then the bass that starts, I think it's in the build up, that one that hits like 4 times or whatever. That one is, I believe, it's an additive synthesis filter bass. So it's basically like a really simple low sine wave, or sawtooth wave, and it has, I think it had like 3 or 4 filters on it that just did some crazy shit, and then overdrive and effects on top of that created like the vocal modulation sound that it has to it. That's basically what that is. And then during the drop, like the like weird funky synth thing, it was another additive thing that had to do with a lot of frequency modulation within the actual generator. There was just a lot of different variables within the modulator that were doing stuff as the note was played. And so when those kind of coincide with each other when the note's played, it gives the weird quality that it has. That's really the only explanation that I have. There was very few additional effects afterwards.
I processed it a little bit after you sent it to me, but I think I only really just maybe a little bit of EQ just to give it a different texture, and then maybe a little bit of compression. But other than that, it was pretty much the same sound. So this is the actual project file for Warlord. You can see, of course, there's a lot more tracks. The idea is a lot more fleshed out. I'm going to first talk about the main part that I did, the second drop. So it alternates between Rule 2 sound design and mine, with having a variation on that lead synth, and then going to something I did, which is this growl sound. And the way I made that actually started out as kind of this kind of shitty ES2 preset. Yeah, it's just called Fat Wobble, so already kind of bad. This is what it sounds like without any processing on it. So pretty bad. Just kind of random dubstep sound, but I thought I could use it, make some cool out of it. So I put Turbo on it, which is a plugin by Sine Vibes. It's really cool. It's like, I'm not really exactly sure how to describe it. It's distortion, but it has a filter and this transformer in an LFO, kind of a lot of crazy stuff, and some other plugins, a ring shifter, a bit crusher, and then a direction mixer to narrow the stereo image, and then an EQ to cut out the lows. It sounds like this. A lot more recognizable as that sound. And so I bounced that, and then I just arranged it into the drop. And then I put a couple more effects on it. Single EQ, just high pass it, and then camel crusher and vocal transformer, so without it. The vocal transformer is just adding some more high frequency content. You can see the mix is down. 35%, and the formants are shifted up. Kind of gives it a little more bite to it. And the Camel Crusher, because Camel Crusher is amazing. And it fans it up a lot. So
You actually can't make a good song without Camel Crusher. It's
usually, you want to put on the master, but sometimes it's good for other stuff as well.
So, Jesus Christ.
But yeah, you can see it's just like arranged and sliced up audio files that fades on them that give it that short decay. And then layered with that are some sounds from a glitch machine pack that accent the growl. So you can see this one. It's a short little sound, but it fits very well with the growl. Same with this one. For a trap drop, you have to have a trap snare, and this has
fuck yeah.
this has four main layers to it. As a 3 layered snares, and then this Foley trap loop that Rule of 2 sent me. Didn't really process it all, just put a compressor on it, and it sounds like this just by itself. And then these are the 3 snare layers. This one is just kind of the meat of the snare. It's not really, I wouldn't really describe it as a meaty snare. It occupies more that high frequency, or not really high frequency, like above 200 hertz, kind of high for a snare sound. I forget exactly where I got the snare originally from, but I made it for a different project and sped it up for this one. And then the other 2 layers give it that tone. So the first one sounds like this. It's very short, and this one it has more of the decay on it. And they layer together very, very nicely. And on the bus for it, there's this compression, EQ, bit crusher for clipping it and making it more fat. So all together that sounds like this. The other main thing I added for the second drop is this 808 line, and it's actually 2 sounds. One is the main 808 that's pretty distorted. Also has a Camel Crusher on it. That is accompanied by this sound, which is a saw wave that's processed by this spectral filter bank. And it's hard to really describe what this does, but it gives it a very interesting texture, is about the best way I can describe it. So without it, just normal saw wave. Not super interesting, but this gives it a very different feel. Actually, it's a little more subtle, but once I distorted it, became a lot more present, and then EQ'd it, just a simple single band to cut out all the low frequencies, so it melded together with the 808. By itself, it sounds pretty weak, but when it's compressed and distorted together with the 808, it gives it a really cool texture that helps it cut through the mix a little bit, and also adds to the growl sound as well, because they're both pretty distorted. Both have Camel Crusher on them. I didn't want them to clash too much, and they end up melding together actually pretty well. So after Rule of 2 sent me the stems, I just wanted to add a few more layers to a lot of them, and I think I replaced some strings, but just wanted to make it a little more cinematic and add more depth to it. So he has original brass, and then that's doubled with the Spitfire Albion 1 horns. Sound like this. And then Albion 5 horns, which are cool, that are much more in the background, have reverb on them. That they're the ones that bend a little bit in pitch. You can hear those better at the end of the song as well. You can see their strings, and then I didn't add anything to the flute because that sounded good on its own. But yeah, that was a lot of what I did with the track, was adding extra layers.
Just an extra tip. He has very good sample libraries, like Albion, Spitfire. Those libraries are very, very good. What I had for the brass was like really shitty. So what I ended up doing to make the brass more not sound as awful as it did originally is I took the MIDI of the original track. It's like 2 notes. It's like a minor third up. I took that and I pitched it up an octave, and then rendered that out, and then brought it back in and pitched it down to the original octave that it's supposed to be at, which is like a really low trombone type octave. And then I messed with the transients on it to get it to sound like it wasn't pitched down, and then that resulted in, because the brass at the higher octave had a slightly different harmonic presence, when you pitch it down, it gives it more beef in like the lower end, and it sounds more rich. That's just what I did to compensate for my like shitty samples. But if you have good libraries, then you don't need to do that. That's just the tip.
Yeah, that's actually a really cool tip, because I haven't done that myself, but I've heard that mentioned and seen examples of it. It can actually lead to some really interesting results. So even if you don't have nicer libraries, you can still get some cool stuff, even if you have to maybe tuck it in the background a little bit more.
Yeah, even if when you do pitch it down, if it doesn't sound exactly like it's supposed to, like it can sound still like pretty cool. Like it doesn't have to sound exactly like brass.
Exactly. So the next little layer here is the claps. You see the sample that Rule 2 had with the track, and then in the second part of the drop, second part of the first drop, 4 more layers come in, and you can see they're panned pretty hard. This adds more width to the claps, and there's a little reverse clap on one of them. And those are actually pretty quiet in the mix. It's pretty subtle, but it fans it up a little bit just to add that little more interest in the second part of the drop. Before the drop hits, there's this big snare that comes in, because I kind of want some kind of like impact, some more stereotypical like house kind of snare, or I guess big room house, which
it's always a good thing, stereotypical house snares.
Oh yeah, and it just sounds like this. And that's just the original snare that Rule 2 sent. Compressed pretty hard. You can see there's OTT on there, so you know it's going to be good. And it has a little white noise layer in it too, for added high end and fatness. There's quite a few hats and cymbals in this track. Hats and rides, just a lot of rhythmic and high frequency content. But you can see it's not all layered together at the same time, so it's not really that overwhelming, even though there are like just a lot of tracks just to have hats and cymbals, but they play at different times. They got, of course, some more housey stuff, or Moomba stuff in the first drop, and then all these trap cymbals that come in the second drop. They're not really playing together at the same time, except for a little bit during the very end of the song, where it's kind of building up. Then I got like the auxiliary drums, which most of this is just what Rule 2 sent. Sort of secondary drums, like has the pitch, the little trap build-up snare that comes in, as well as like some impacts, the toms that Rule 2 sent, the big chant. And then getting down into percussion, this is a lot of layers. Got a lot of shakers and stuff, just to accent the original stems that Rule 2 sent. See, there are quite a few shakers. They actually had a lot, in my opinion, and as well as some other drums as well. Like this, it says shakers, but it's not actually shakers. It sounds like this. Kind of actually low drums that play a rhythm very similar to the tablas that are the original stuff that Rule 2 sent. That all accents very nicely, especially in this part. It's one of my favorite parts in the track where everything really drops out except for the big drums and these dulls right here, which are an 8 dio library that are pretty cool. These are bounced to an audio file instead of being MIDI, just to save some CPU. Then another layer that made things even more cinematic, of course, are the impacts, especially these reversals and kind of bigger hits. They help add to the cinematic feel, like accompanying those like really big horns that play. And then the last two groups are pretty similar. There's FX and Ambience. There's not anything super revolutionary going on with these. I've just got a lot of like pretty standard risers and some background fill stuff. See, there's a crowd background. There's actually two. There's another one in this group, and this group is added actually after everything else was, because we worked on Rift kind of over the course of a year, so it's a lot of working on it.
Oh no,
it was a year. It was a long time.
Just wait for that video. That video will be a trip.
If y'all don't know, and y'all don't know,
yo, what if we went through like all 6 variations?
Oh Lord.
That's a different video.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But I felt like the track was just missing a few more elements, so these were all added in to help things stand out a little bit more. So there's another different crowd sample here that kind of fills up space. That's called Hollerin'. But it's pretty cool sound. Kind of gives it that I don't know, sounds like you're in an angry crowd or something. It sounds kind of cool. The other thing that I feel like really added a lot were these 3 samples down here, these gong kits, as well as these cymbals up here. So they sound like this by themselves. And without them, the track sounds, or especially the first intro, doesn't quite sound as big. Like, still sounds cool, but like without this group, it's just the horns and a big drum hit, and this adds a lot more sustain to that. Kind of get these cool gong sounds in there. And helps add to the ambience. Of course, got like the rain FX, and then later in the track there's like 4 sounds. At first we had it like after the second drop it just ended instead of going back into the first drop.
Yeah, and then when you brought back the original kind of hook from the first drop into the second drop, a couple more things were added. I think you added strings and then like another hat loop or something. And that yeah. I thought that really helped it along. That really helped with the rhythm and stuff, because it gave it a lot more energy that the first drop kind of lacked.
Yeah, so after the second drop, it goes right back into pretty much the same pattern, or yeah, the exact same section from the first drop. But after that, the end of the song, it adds elements from both drops into it, as well as these high strings that come in. I know this is low strings, but they're actually high. Those come in. The trap, little hi-hats come in as well. Sort of all this is building up to the very end of the song. And then after that, it fades out and then comes back in, which I kind of happened by accident. It ended up being a really cool ending. And it kind of ends on that, the last thing you hear is just that high string fading out, which I think is really cool.